Meet The Lot, native token of Lukki Exchange and the most potential tool for investing this year. Trade now on P2B, B2B and Lukki.io.
Thank you. That's the first thing I have to say, because it was an article by you, the introduction to Bitcoin for libertarians, that you had on your blog. I didn't know you. I read it, and it turned me from a Bitcoin skeptic, having all this Austin economics, skepticism, should he be backed by gold, into the guy I'm now, right? So in a way, without you, we wouldn't be here. At least I wouldn't be here. Yeah? Somebody else would sit here. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
And yeah, just how did you get into crypto?
Well, I think your visual kind of captures my motivation.
That's why I chose it.
Yeah, very apropos. Well, basically, after college, I moved to Dubai, and this was in 2008, 2009. The global financial crisis had happened, and I started really getting interested in monetary economics and banking. And I've always been a libertarian, but I had not really thought of it in the context of money. I think I grew up, like all people do, just assuming that money is a piece of what government does. And during that period, I learned a lot about how banks work, and basically came to the conclusion that money itself was far too important to be left to government. And it was one of those eureka moments, and I didn't know what to do. This was pre-Bitcoin. So I just sort of stewed in my antagonism about the state of the world. And then a couple years later, I had moved back to the US. I was in New Hampshire for the Free State Project, and I learned about Bitcoin, and suddenly I discover that there is this truly free market form of money.
Remember that moment? Wait, what is an article or somebody telling you? What was the key moment?
Yeah, it was a Facebook post. Another Free Stater had posted a Facebook
Thanks, Mark
message.
Zuckerberg.
Yeah.
He made you into it.
Yeah, so I was skeptical for about 10 minutes, and then when I
faster than me.
Yeah, it was a pretty quick realization. I mean, basically realizing that the thing could not be turned off, and that I could send value anywhere in the world instantly at near zero cost sounded like that was something truly revolutionary, that something that was inevitable, seemed imminently powerful and very important for the world. So ever since then, I've been down the rabbit hole and have seen this industry grow from, a few hundred people that were kind of like interested in the tech to
That
global
was this
phenomenon.
famous first Bitcoin conference in New York. That's who you're referring to, where there were less than 100 people.
Yeah, there
like Charlie and Roger and everybody.
The first crypto conference ever. It was just called the Bitcoin conference, I think, and it was in New York in August of 2011. There were 50 of us. 50, yeah. It was people from all over the world, and that was the community. Like, that was the first time a lot of these people had ever met in person.
Anybody here that was there? Okay, wow. Ira, yeah,
yep.
Okay, sure.
So I met Ira there.
You met Ira there, okay.
Yep.
And you met Charlie there, right? Charlie
No,
Schramm?
I did not meet Charlie there.
Oh.
But Ira and I went on to work with Charlie at BitInstant months later. So I met Roger Ver there. I met the BitPay guys there. And it was one of those things, like back in those days, I didn't have a lot of money, and deciding to spend $500 to take a bus down to New York on some weird conference was, I debated that for a while, but I felt like this is something really important, and was very glad that I went.
Now did this cooperation with Charlie and Ira on BitInstant, how did this start? And can you tell me about the early days, yeah? Before Charlie went to jail.
Yeah, so Charlie started a company called BitInstant, and Roger Ver, who basically seed funded every early crypto project, put money into BitInstant. I was the third employee at BitInstant, and Ira joined me there a couple months later, I think. And basically, it was a way to move fiat from cash or banks into Mt. Gox or Trade Hill at the time. So instead of sending a week-long wire transfer, you basically give money to us, and we have money at the exchange, so we credit you. So it turns a week-long process into an hour. And when the price of Bitcoin doubles every day, that can be a very valuable tool for people. So it had a lot of early success.
Okay. Were you there in that moment when Charlie was arrested? I mean, he had left BitInstant then, or how was the conversation?
So we had a couple investors. You guys might have heard of these guys, the Winklevoss twins. They, I don't want to speak poorly of them, but we didn't agree on things after they invested. And it ended in a big. Ira remembers this event well. It ended in a meeting in which they yelled at us, called us a bunch of names, said that we were idiots and didn't know what we were doing. We told them that BitInstant would collapse if we left. They yelled at us more. We left. BitInstant collapsed a few months later. And Charlie ended up getting arrested for something that was going on, I think, during the time that Ira and I were there. We weren't aware of it, but he got arrested because he sold Bitcoin to a guy who sold Bitcoin to someone who was buying drugs on Silk Road. And so since Charlie knew that the guy was selling to that other person who was choosing to make decisions with his own body, which is not permitted in the US, Charlie went to jail for 1.5 years. Well, everyone knows that if there's an ATM that is accessed at 2 in the morning, that person is probably buying drugs, right? Everyone knows this. Chase Bank certainly knows it. They're using government currency to buy drugs directly after taking it from the cash machine. That's fine. But Charlie selling Bitcoin to someone who sold Bitcoin to someone who wanted to put drugs in his own body, that's apparently illegal and worthy of ruining someone's life for 1.5 years. Yeah, it was a horrible travesty, and I think everyone in crypto should know that story of what happened to Charlie.
I mean, I don't think it has totally ruined his life. I mean, he read lots of books. He wrote all these great articles. It seemed that he made kind of the best out of it, but still, of course, it's such a waste. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie was 23 or 24 when it happened, and he absolutely made the best of it. I mean, I think that kind of situation would have caused a lot of people to break down and become very depressed, and I'm sure Charlie went through those phases, but he used the opportunity as a self-improvement and reflection. He's out now. He's happily married. So he's fine. But yeah, I mean, it was 1.5 years of his life that was stolen from him.
Yeah. What made you move to Panama then after BitInstant with Ira and all the guys?
Yeah, so we were starting Coinapult, and we wanted to build it anywhere other than the US. That was kind of requirement number one. Okay. Panama was in the same time zone. Panama had no taxation, and it had mostly no financial regulations as long as you're not serving Panamanian customers. So those things combined put it high on our list, and we moved down there. Ira still lives down there.
Yeah, I saw him there. I visited him there. But why didn't you stay? Too hot or missed the US?
I'm a sucker for mountains. Unfortunately, there aren't, and for snow, and there's not much of either at the equator. That's why you're now in Switzerland, yeah, officially? I love Switzerland. I love Switzerland for sure. But most of my friends and family are in Colorado, so I moved back there.
Okay, cool. Okay, so tell us a little bit about Satoshi Dice, please. How did you come to that idea, and how did it all started?
Yeah, quick show of hands, like whoever played Satoshi Dice back in the day? 4 or 5 people. Okay, so Satoshi Dice was the biggest Bitcoin gambling site ever back in those days. In 2012 and 2013, it was half of the Bitcoin network. So more than 1 out of every 2 Bitcoin transactions were going in or out of Satoshi Dice. And it started as this very, kind of side project thing while I was at BitInstant. But it totally took off, and I think it took off because it was a really good expression of the principles that make Bitcoin itself great. And those were the ability to move funds anywhere in the world instantly between 2 parties that don't necessarily know or trust each other, to know that the payment will work, will get there, and can be sent back as well. And then it used a really clever trick of cryptography to basically prove that the odds that we were advertising were actually what we were advertising.
It's probably provably fair.
Provably fair, right. Which is an amazing concept. It's amazing that concept is not caught on in the broader gambling world. Most people who go to a casino and they play don't know what the odds are, first of all. And if they were told what the odds are, they have no way of knowing what it is. And I think if people realize that you can actually prove the odds with cryptography, like people would demand that. And it was just a beautiful demonstration of the power of cryptography to innovate something that government had failed to do forever, right? So gambling is heavily regulated in most jurisdictions. In many, it's illegal. And in those places where it is legal, there are groups of people that are charged with policing the gaming, right? So they check on the games and make sure they're fair, whatever that means. It's a horribly corrupt system and doesn't really work very well. But that's the status quo. And then Satoshi Dice comes along and uses cryptography to demonstrate fairness mathematically, not because a regulator mandated it. not because there was some rule or some king that said we should do it, but through the competitive entrepreneurial dynamic. So I think for those reasons, it just really caught on well and was a fun project to be involved in.
Why did you sell it?
So as I mentioned, it is a heavily regulated industry, and gambling's legality in the US is a somewhat gray area. It's not technically illegal, but using the banking system for gambling payments is illegal. So what that means for a Bitcoin casino is somewhat gray. And as I was getting better known in the crypto industry, I realized I could either be an advocate for Bitcoin and help it grow, or I could run the world's biggest Bitcoin casino, but not both.
Okay.
So it was an amazing business. I wish I didn't have to have sold it, but I did.
You sold it for Bitcoin, I hope, in 2013.
Sold it for Bitcoin. There were a lot of other investors that ended up making a good amount of money from it. So I didn't make nearly as much as people thought I did, but the enterprise generally was very profitable, and it was a shame to have to sell it just because men with guns thought that you should have to have a piece of paper in order to operate a gambling site when that site itself is mathematically fair versus the ones that have the paper slip. Through that investment, I get all sorts of great benefits and perks, like they'll build missiles with that money and kill people in lands that I don't know about. They will use that money to basically cause problems all over the world and destroy the entrepreneurial spirit domestically. And I get all that just by giving them money. So I gave them a bunch, and that's where a lot of it went.
I guess that many people, especially like the Bitcoin maximalists, were a bit surprised when you, as a big Bitcoin advocate, suddenly invest in something about these old coins. At that time, they were still kind of dodgy, weren't they? I mean, why did you do that?
I mean, most altcoins are still dodgy. Can we just be honest about that? Yeah, so I mean, I used to be a Bitcoin maximalist, and my heart and soul have always been very dedicated to Bitcoin primarily. But I came to see two things, basically. One, that the experimentation of other chains was important, and two, that if you actually believe in decentralization, you cannot simultaneously hold the view that there should be only one blockchain. Like, that kind of monoculture in a technology like this is not compatible with a desire for actual decentralization. So as I realized those two things, I became much more open to other blockchains, other tokens and coins. This was kind of pre-Ethereum, and going down that line of thinking, I started, as these other coins came out, I started realizing that these tokens were going to become used for many things, right? Bitcoin was intended as a money. Many other coins would be intended as other things, and now I think it's all obvious to people that coins and tokens can represent lots of different attributes and services. So Shapeshift was basically built to allow someone to move one of these assets into another with the least amount of friction possible.
It's super easy to use. I always use it. I mean, if ever I buy crypto, yeah. Usually I don't, yeah. But sometimes.
Yeah.
I just earn, yeah. But, so I don't
well,
need
if you're buying crypto, that means that you had fiat, and I would say, why did you have the fiat, right? So
I don't have fiat.
Yeah, that's why you're not buying crypto.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that's good. anyone who's buying crypto means that they didn't buy it earlier, and so then you have to ask why.
So what are the plans now? I know that you have Diversified, you have Prism, and you have the KeepKey, right? I mean, what's next? What's your time plan?
In addition to the Shapeshift Exchange, we run CoinCap, which is a market data site, and we run Prism, which is an Ethereum-based smart contract portfolio management system, and we acquired KeepKey last summer, which is one of the hardware wallet companies.
What's next?
I can't tell you that yet. We are doing something cool with all of these that will become clear in the future, but not quite ready to reveal that.
Okay. And will you work with other blockchains rather than Ethereum? Let's say RSK or EOS or?
Yeah, actually, I don't know if I'm supposed to say this yet, but Prism is working on.
Among us.
Prism is working on
very
RSK.
Intimate conference. You can talk about everything. Yeah, it's not streamed.
Yeah, Prism's working on RSK. That's always been a plan. So any smart contract platform that becomes used and usable, that technology will work on.
One last question before we open up to the audience. Of course, you guys should also be able to ask Erik. what's your point on the scaling debate? I mean, I think I remember last year when there was this New York agreement, you're very much in favor of it. It
Yep,
failed.
I was.
What do you think about all these forks and all these Bitcoin, cash and gold and silver and plutonium and whatever comes next?
So I think the existence of Bitcoin Cash is a demonstration of what happens when consensus is failed to be achieved, right? So the community debated for years about the right block size. I think everyone lost the debate, myself included, and it turned a bunch of friends and allies that were into crypto because it was changing the world into warring tribes that were arguing over really minute details of a technology. And it was really depressing for me to see that coming from a time before the block size wars, to see people adamantly hating other Bitcoiners because their version of what they thought it should be was a little bit different. So it was really depressing, and basically everyone lost the debate, and it ended with two big events last year. One was the New York Agreement, which was a bunch of people that wanted basically SegWit to be activated and a 2 megabyte base block as well. And after the New York Agreement achieved significant consensus, I mean 95% miner consensus and a good portion of the community, although that's hard to measure, out of nowhere comes Bitcoin Cash on August 4th or August 1st of last year. And many of the people who supported the bigger block part of the SegWit 2x plan got captured up into the Bitcoin Cash fork. And so what you ended up having was the New York Agreement happening, 95% of miners signaling for that plan of doing a doubling of the block size plus SegWit. SegWit activation happens first. Then Bitcoin Cash occurs, and then a whole bunch of people start arguing that the 2 megabyte upgrade hard fork shouldn't occur because, look, there's this other chain that has a bigger block now. Basically, a whole bunch of infighting again happened, and it got even worse and nastier. And by the time that the fork on the SegWit 2x plan was supposed to happen, there was not a critical mass of support for that. It was some minority. And so a number of us that were involved in it basically called off that fork a week or two before it was scheduled to happen. And so what resulted was we have Bitcoin Cash now, which has like 32 megabyte blocks, and we have Bitcoin, which has SegWit, which is great. And the block size debate is pretty much over. I mean, that fork happened, the communities have diverged. There's a lot of people that wanted both bigger blocks and SegWit that are sort of in the middle and feel kind of lost now. But I'm glad that it ended. I'm glad that SegWit finally got activated on Bitcoin, and I hope that the tribalism will go away over time, and that people will realize that the enemy is not like which brand of crypto you hold most of, but is fiat currency and banks and the status quo financial system. That was the rallying cry of what got us interested in this in the first place. And so hopefully these wounds heal over time. We learn some lessons from it. We treat each other with respect, and we move forward.
I mean, fortunately now there will be more women in blockchain, so less testosterone-driven competition that kind of useless, yeah? So what's your take on the Lightning Network?
So up until the last 6 months, Lightning was pretty much vaporware, and it is actually now like becoming a thing. So it required SegWit to actually start happening. SegWit was activated, Lightning Network is starting to be built, and it's very, very alpha, lots of bugs, lots of problems, not very useful yet. But that was also the case of Bitcoin in 2010. So I have super high hopes for Lightning. If it lives up to half of its potential, it'll be really groundbreaking. And I'm glad that there are pioneers that will push that technology forward before it's useful for normal people. Generally, anyone who appeals to these conspiracy theories to debate over points about the crypto tech, I generally dismiss pretty quickly, because you see it on both sides. The most ridiculous people in all of these tribal camps are the ones lobbying the conspiracy theories against the other ones. The big blockers lobby the conspiracy theory of Blockstream controlling Bitcoin Core, and they are in the pockets of the bankers. The Bitcoin Core supporters lobby all sorts of similar arguments against many of the Bitcoin Cash people, against Jihan and Roger, saying that they are corporate shills themselves, or that the New York Agreement was just a bunch of corporate suits coming in. All that stuff is a bunch of bullshit, and basically you have intelligent people simply disagreeing about things that are unclear. And but that argument's not as romantic or fun to hurl insults with on Twitter.
Great. Okay, questions from you guys, please. Oh yeah. Questions from you guys. Don't be shy. Come on. Yeah. Sterling. Yeah.
Hey, Eric, we had a little time getting to know each other a little bit yesterday, and I was starting to think about this a bit more. I spend a lot of time at conferences, a lot of time educating people on cryptocurrency, especially our roots in the cypherpunk movement and this crypto-anarchist ecosystem that we sort of sprung from. And I'm just curious, what would your advice be on how to continue educating people along this particular pathway, remembering the sort of philosophical components to this to help breaking down the system as it currently exists and getting outside of this nasty fiat banking reserve system that we currently find ourselves in?
Yeah, great question. So as the community has grown from hundreds to thousands to millions now, the ideology of what many people were interested in at the beginning has gotten diluted and watered down. And some people, I think, lament about that fact, but I actually think it's good and natural. And most of the world's population is not ready to understand that money should not be controlled by a monopoly government. Like, that's too radical of a notion for people to get. And instead of spending your time convincing all those people that their fundamental understanding of money is wrong, it is better to simply build technologies that attract those people into it. And I think it's very good that the message of Bitcoin and crypto is not just a bunch of radical ANCAPs. If it was, this would remain a niche tool for those radical ANCAPs. I want this to be global. I really want it to take over the world. I want it to displace fiat currencies. And to do that, I think you have to be careful with the messaging that you send. And this gets expressed in a lot of ways. I mean, there are a lot of people in crypto that hate companies like Coinbase because they operate very similar to a bank. I think those companies are immensely important. They offer a great bridge to normal people who, if we don't bring into this ecosystem will never grow, and it will never actually take over anything. So that's a long-winded answer, but I think a balanced approach is important. If someone gets interested in crypto and they want to learn about some of the ideological underpinnings of why money should be handled in a marketplace rather than a coercive government, talk to them about that. But don't lead with the anarchist undertones of what this technology actually does, because people will put up their defense mechanisms and you won't actually get as far.
Great. More questions, please. Dima. Yes. Go ahead. Vera gives you the mic.
Oh, okay. Hi, Eric. So yeah, we are pretty connected maybe for 4 years, but I don't know who am I. Neither am I also. So the question is, I'm a marketologist, and I would like to ask, when could we build proper advertising campaigns for businesses like yours? I'm speaking about lifetime value of your users. So what is interesting to me, like a marketologist, what is LTV for users at Shapeshift?
We don't actually know how many users we have. It could all just be Aaron every day doing 10,000 orders. It's actually been an interesting challenge, like as a business, trying to know what your customers are, who they are, what they want, when you don't know who they are or where they are or what they want. So I can't tell you what the lifetime value of a customer on Shapeshift is. I have no idea how many we have.
Is it too light here? Too much light?
I like
for
those
you?
sunglasses.
I like my glasses. I just like them. So
You look
keep
cool.
them.
Anyway.
Thanks. The fire, it's there.
Ah, okay. So.
About the branding, actually, I sometimes have this concern about Bitcoin not having a marketing strategy because there's no brand behind supporting Bitcoin as a currency, and you have these other platforms. Well, Cash has a big strategy behind, but you have these other platforms like Dash and Decreed and EOS that have this sponsoring method for people to put things and give value through payment of the same Dash, Decreed, and EOS, paying them to do value on top of the system. And we, the Bitcoins maximalists and the ones that are in this industry, we have no similar strategy or no way to build a strategy on top of this, rather than being a free giver of Bitcoins to support it. So do you think this might be a problem if we see it in the future, like all this marketing strategy against our only appreciation price getting in all the media strategy?
Great
bubble
question.
strategy. We have the bubble strategy, and the others have the
So Bitcoin is very decentralized, and this is obviously one of its strengths, but it's a double-edged sword. So where do you go to learn what Bitcoin is, right? There's no Bitcoin company to tell you what it is, and you will not see a Bitcoin commercial on television that explains what Bitcoin is in a very professional and refined way. That's sometimes a problem, because if those things were done, people would learn more easily what Bitcoin is. However, if you were doing that, and that kind of group was set up back in Bitcoin's early days, it would have spent all of its time marketing Bitcoin as a payment method, because that's how all of us saw this in the early days of Bitcoin. It was a way to pay merchants online. That was like the big theme. If Bitcoin was a company and it had a marketing branding agency, it would lose a lot of its value in that people see in Bitcoin what they want to see. I see Bitcoin as a tool to change fiat currency, or to make fiat currency go away. Other people see a way of democratizing finance. Other people see an amazing technology that's pushing the bounds of cryptography or networks, and they project that onto it. If there was one branding firm or organization for Bitcoin, you would lose that multifaceted element. And I think for Bitcoin especially, it's really important to keep that. Now, Ethereum has a beautiful brand. Like, they do some of the best brand work in the ecosystem. It's worked very well for them. So I don't think that just because Bitcoin should have that kind of decentralized, messy brand to it, everything else should. I think part of the decentralization is that people have different models. But for Bitcoin, at least, I don't lament the fact that there's not a polished branding initiative behind it.
We had a question
Yes.
there?
Yeah. One question. You mentioned that you are with Shapeshift now in Switzerland. Is the choice for Switzerland only because of the mountains, or why you were going there instead of going to nice places like Panama or Malta, where the sun is shining, more or less?
Yeah,
What
I
was
mean,
the most benefit of Switzerland, in especially the case of cryptos related stuff?
it wasn't totally not because of the mountains. Largely, it was similar calculus that I did when deciding on Panama. First priority was not the U.S., and after that, you have criteria. So Zug, Switzerland, has one of the lowest tax rates in all of Europe. Switzerland has very good data privacy protection. Switzerland, I also felt, had a very strong lineage of understanding the value of financial privacy, which I felt would be important over the long term. And also, there were just a lot of crypto companies getting started in Zug, so there was some sort of institutional expertise in how to set this stuff up. But
I was thrilled by your resume of the fights of last year, saying that a number of intelligent people actually argued about something that was not clear. And I hope that that everybody will get together again to work towards that common goal that was the previous goal originally. When I entered the whole idea, basically only last year, have to admit, I've consulted a number of people.
What's the question? Ask a question, please.
Yeah, I just need to go that little deviation. When I entered the space, the first thing I did was become a member of the Bitcoin Foundation, and I paid my fee. Of course, I can support Patreon people on Patreon as well, but the question was, I think Bitcoin doesn't really need a marketing institution. It should rather have an embassy or something, some structure that actually appoints ambassadors that maybe nationally or even broken down on cities go around and teach the basic principles of Bitcoin?
There are lots of Bitcoin embassies everywhere, and they're just in Buenos Aires and Tel Aviv. They are there. They don't have to be appointed. That would be
Okay.
not a great. Sorry for answering, but
No, sorry. I'll tell
Sorry,
you
I
the,
should have answered that question before myself then.
I'll tell you the dirty little secret of Bitcoin marketing. You guys ready for this? So you can spend all the time that you want teaching people all the reasons why Bitcoin is important, why it will change the world, how, why that's better than the current status quo. Some of them will listen to you and some of them won't. But nothing gets attention like the price bubbles. When the price of Bitcoin moons, and I've gone through 4 of these cycles, millions of people become interested. Call that good or bad. That is what drives new adoption into the ecosystem. And when the price falls again, some of those people leave, but not all of them. And you get this new influx of people that get excited about it. And I have to admit, that's how I was. When I first learned about Bitcoin, it was on a huge run. If it had been flat, I don't know that I would have spent the time to go through the mental understanding of what it was. But there's something about seeing the incredible value growth that will change people's minds into a position of being open and receptive to something new. So you can have all the Bitcoin embassies in the world you want. It won't compare to the next bubble.
the guy with the La BitConf T-shirt has the last word.
Thanks a lot, Eric and Aaron. I enjoy a lot the chat. The question is very short, but has a second part if we have time. Yes, no question, please. Do you think that people is dying in Africa because of Bitcoin?
Do I think that people are
Just
starving?
no, please, Eric, sorry, because the question is after.
I don't know. I don't know enough about every African to answer that conclusively.
Okay, so my question is, do you think that this kind of techniques and others that are being made are compliant with the philosophical principles that I think brought us here into crypto?
Can you elaborate? Can you elaborate what you mean?
If this kind of techniques to get market share in this marketing strategy are compliance with the philosophical principles that crypto is about and that brought us here?
The philosophical principles are not intrinsic to Bitcoin. They are subjective in the people that come into Bitcoin, right? So I have my ideological reasons why I like this stuff. You probably do as well. And if we polled everyone in here, many of us would agree with certain things, but many of us would not. There is not one ideology of Bitcoin. It is an open source software protocol, right? So you can't say whether one thing matches the ideology of Bitcoin. There is no ideology of Bitcoin. It is a technology. People will project their own ideologies onto it, and they will use it as a tool, as all humans have done throughout time with the tools they come across.